the biggest thing that I see that has been prevalent for as long as I've been in the industry, and is probably prevalent in most industries, is that people are living in the current and not in the future, and thinking about the work that they need to be doing today in order to be successful tomorrow. So putting programs in place, trainings in place, things that are developing the next generation of leadership, whether it be in your organization or in the industry or wherever it is, but making that investment early on, because tomorrow is going to happen, whether you're ready for it or not. So having the vision and being able to understand that the investment now is going to pay off in the future.
Welcome, everyone, to the Restoration Playbook podcast. I'm Leighton, Healey, CEO of KnowHow, and today I have Travis Martin. He's here to kick off a brand new season of the Restoration Playbook podcast. Travis is a huge part of the team here at KnowHow. He's the man behind the howdy, as we say. You may have seen him on our YouTube channel, introducing all the killer features that we introduce into the market. But beyond the howdy, there's someone who leads huge components of the team. Travis is the Vice President of Product, Vice President of Marketing, and he toes an enormous amount of the big initiatives that we have here. Travis, you're going to be the host of this next season. Tell us about that.
That's right. I'm super excited. Actually, almost excited as I am about this idea that you gave me for my memoir, Travis Martin, Beyond the Howdy. But yeah, this season is going to be incredible. We spent the last few months chatting with some of the just highest quality leaders in the restoration industry, learning about how do they think about not just being a leader themselves, but building that next generation of leader. So we're talking to people like Ben Looper, Mark Springer, Holly Murray, Jim Kowalski, Julie Johnson. The list goes on. And we took a lot of their expertise and wisdom and distilled it into a book that's coming up very soon that I'll talk about in just a second. But in this season of the Restoration Playbook podcast, we'll be diving deep into those long form interviews with each one of those leaders. And so if you've ever wanted to sit down with some of those people and get 25, 30, 35 minutes of their time, we found some time in their schedule and we did that. And so we're really excited to dive into those long form interviews. But like I said, all of this leads up to the book, Building Leaders, that we are launching on October 7th. And you can join the waitlist right now to pre-register it and get your copy for free on October 7th. We'll email it to you at buildingleadersbook.com. Or if you're like me and you like to highlight and make notes, you can get a hard copy. It'll be available on Amazon when we launch as well. This book is really exciting. This season of the Restoration Playbook podcast, I think, is going to be super impactful. But Leighton, I want to throw it back to you. You were one of the leaders that we interviewed for this book. Obviously, helped understand. You've been building leaders for decades now. You've had the opportunity to present on this book already a few times. What are some of the things that you're most excited about with this book? And why is now the right time for a book like this in the restoration industry?
So the topic of leadership resonates with most people, especially individuals who run these companies that we serve. They tend to deeply resonate with the topic of leadership. And a lot has been written on leadership. I think that there's been a lot that has been written to motivate people to be a good leader, whatever that means. This book is focused on leader building, which is the work of how within the hustle and bustle of the day-to-day operations that so easily consume every, waking moment of our days, how do we make space to build leaders within our organization and do so very intentionally? People-powered industries as a whole are going through tremendous change at an accelerated rate. And so that change is being accelerated by the rise of new technologies and capabilities. That change is being driven by the change in I would say, just the overall wiring of the workers who are coming into the industry. And then it's also being driven by the change of the guard, meaning that a lot of individuals who are fundamental in building the industry as it is today are beginning to transition out. And so within all of that change, anytime you're navigating change, you need leaders. You need leaders who can understand and lean into the future and can paint a picture, can describe a path forward, but also can be able to deal with the change management, and let's call it just the human dynamic of getting people on board. So that's leadership. And what we've observed is that there's been such a pattern of people just, I would say, working operationally heads down in the organization without giving too much thought or attention to how do I make time in my day to think intentionally around building leaders within my organization who will carry on the vision, who carry on the torch. When you talk to people in the industry and you say, "Hey, I aspire to be a great leader in this organization, but I lack a mentor." And so we said, "Well, who would you like to mentor you?" And when you ask that question enough times, you start to identify individuals in the industry who are really seen as great builders of leaders. And so we're very fortunate to have been able to enlist the generous help of many of those individuals who contributed their lived knowledge, their lived wisdom to this effort. So it's an exciting book. I think it's a very well timed book, and I've been able to present it several times so far this fall. And each time coming off stage, met with individuals who've said, "This is one of the most urgent things that we need to address, and we need a playbook."
Awesome. I'm gonna grab. If this sounds too good to be true, this is what it looks like. This is what you're looking at here. The Building Leaders book coming out October 7th. If you are one of those individuals that says this is exactly what we need right now, make sure to go to buildingleadersbook.com, pre-register, subscribe to this podcast because there's going to be a ton of insights, and stay tuned for what's to come because we're really excited to walk through what's going to be a really incredible season of the Restoration Playbook podcast that is super well timed.
Awesome. And thanks everyone who joined us for the first 2 seasons of the Restoration Playbook podcast. I'm happy to say you're in very good hands as Travis hosts this next season as we kick things off with Ben Looper. So Ben's here to introduce himself. So why don't we jump right in?
Hi, my name is Ben Looper, CEO of Southeast Restoration Group, current RIA President, and this is how I think about building leaders.
Thank you very much for joining us for a conversation today. I'm really excited to dive into your perspective on building leaders, but specifically this area around how do you build that next generation of leaders? And I think especially the emotional intelligence side, I think sometimes can be forgotten in the restoration industry. It's not uncommon for someone to have a lot of hard skills and get promoted because of those hard skills, only to find that the soft skills required to be an excellent leader, they haven't yet been trained up on. And so I'm really excited to dive into that topic. But to get started, Ben, could you just walk us through quickly your background? How did you get into restoration and into the position you're at today?
Yeah, absolutely. Fortunately, I fell into it. I was in college, and a friend of mine that I'd went to high school with had not gone to college and gotten into the industry, and had moved to Florida, learned the business, got licensed, and then moved back to be with his fiance, future wife, and get married. She wasn't going to move to Florida, so he moved back to Georgia and started his own business. And I ran into him a couple of times. I had been in the construction industry for several years, and he mentioned this opportunity. I didn't know what restoration was, wasn't even familiar with it, and he shared it with me. Loved the concept because it was something different every day, and that was 30 years ago that I joined him in the industry, and so it's been a fun ride. Before there was really an industry around restoration, I fell into it. I was very blessed and fell into it at the right time.
So walk me through that journey from you're finding out about restoration, you're like, okay, there's something here, to where you're at today, current president of the RIA, leading the helm at Southeast Restoration. Like what was that journey like?
Yeah, it's been fun, having to learn the industry, and technology has changed everything. When I started in the industry, there was no cell phones. There was literally pay phones and map books that you had to get to from one location to another. Relationships were different, and where you were getting work from. So so many things have continued to evolve and change to where it is today. And then, like I said, 30 years later, we're fortunate to have built a company with over 260 team members and 8 locations that is servicing the Southeast region.
That's awesome. Well, speaking of growing and evolving, the big thing that we want to talk about today is how restoration companies need to continue to grow and evolve, and especially invest into that next generation of leaders. I'm curious, from your perspective, what are some of the mistakes that you see restoration companies making when it comes to building up that next generation of leaders?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I see that has been prevalent for as long as I've been in the industry, and is probably prevalent in most industries, is that people are living in the current and not in the future, and thinking about the work that they need to be doing today in order to be successful tomorrow. So putting programs in place, trainings in place, things that are developing the next generation of leadership, whether it be in your organization or in the industry or wherever it is, but making that investment early on, because tomorrow is going to happen, whether you're ready for it or not. So having the vision and being able to understand that the investment now is going to pay off in the future.
And it makes sense, right? This is by nature, it's a reactive industry, right? The storms come in, the hurricanes come, and you have to spring into action. And so it often feels like there's a personality type that's really well suited to just responding. That forward level of planning sometimes may not come as naturally. So imagine you're chatting with a leader who they say, I think I've got 10, 15 years left. Like, this is not an emergency yet, but I want to set up my company for success. What are some of those questions they should be asking themselves today in preparation for that? Like, how do I continue to build and grow that next generation of leaders?
I think it's first, it's having the vision to be able to take the time to look that far ahead, because so many people are just looking to today and what's right in front of them. And so literally having the vision and scheduling and taking some time to think about what those next steps should be and who it should be with. So I think when visionaries that are capable of doing that can spend some focus time in that area, it helps prepare them. We utilize the term you're either going to react or respond. And when you're not prepared, when you don't do the work on the front end, you react, which usually creates additional problems, and you are not able to service either the customer or your team members or whoever it is the way that you could if you would have taken the time on the front end to prepare accordingly, which gives you the opportunity to respond. So, and first responders, and I'll use the police force or the fire departments, they train all the time because they have to respond to emergencies. Well, we're in an industry where we respond to emergencies. And if we're not training, then we're reacting as opposed to responding to those emergencies.
What I hear you saying is there is groundwork that needs to be done to put you in a position where you can respond to those emergencies, those crises, not flat-footed, but actually ready and to handle what's going to come. The thing that we see a lot of leaders neglect when they're looking for that next generation of leaders is asking themselves the question, am I leading myself well first? And do I have those principles internally before I go and try to instill them in the next generation of leaders in my company? What are some of those principles that you would say you as a leader have to have first before you can successfully start to cultivate new leaders in your company?
Sure. Yeah, I think it all begins with character, loyalty, and integrity. But also things like preparedness, and the willingness to change when things aren't going well, being willing to change. So knowing and being able to see and ask yourself the hard questions, and knowing the timing on what you should be doing when you should be doing it, and then being able to look into the future with your visionary work and spending that time on that.
So help me understand how these principles of character and loyalty manifest themselves into the culture at Southeast Restoration.
Yeah, it's kind of a non-negotiable. Not kind of. It is a non-negotiable. We have what we consider the GOAT culture, greatest of all time. So culture is so important to our organization. It's the bedrock or the foundation. We're a people first organization. A lot of leaders and motivators are motivated financially. Fortunately or unfortunately, I am not. The financial aspect of the equation was not my primary motivation. The people growth and development of our organization. And I think it's paid off well. The leaders that I studied and followed were the same and focused on the people in the organization and being able to grow them as future leaders and put them in spots where they could be successful and the money took care of itself. So I think that's most important. But when you have a situation where character or integrity is broken, then trust takes a long time to gain back. So you have to make the right decisions day after day, even when they're hard, especially when they're hard. So when those hard decisions come, making the right decisions, and it will cost you, some time and some money in certain situations, but in the long run, making the right decisions will always help you get to where you want to go.
I wonder if you could ground that in an example for us. Obviously, anonymize whatever needs to be anonymized, but it's that rubber hits the road. We were talking about this, like the difference between giving a kind of like high-minded principle. Like I think everyone would say, I value integrity.
Sure.
Right. It's another thing when you're in a situation where it might cost you thousands,
Sure.
not far beyond that.
Sure. Yeah. The most recent that comes to mind is we had a deep freeze in the South last year, and we had a large church project that we were working on. And our guys went in and started the demolition and doing the work that needed to be done in there. But there was one step they missed, and that was with some asbestos testing. And the reality is the church and the leadership and the facilities group at the church would have never known. But we knew after the fact and looking at the time frame and the dates, we knew that it was an issue, and we had missed a step. And so we self-penalized ourselves to the tune of about $80,000 to $100,000 that we had to go back and fix on our own dime, which was essentially all and then some of the profits that we would have made on that project. So we worked that part of the project and the remainder of the project essentially for nothing. But we called ourselves out on it to the church, to the adjuster, and told them what had happened and what had done, and we fixed it on our own dime. Because I like to sleep well at night, and I wouldn't have been able to do that if we would have known that we missed that integral step in the process and didn't do the right thing. And the greatest part of that, story is I didn't know about it till after the fact. My team had the character to make that decision, and it cost everybody involved along the way. It cost all of us, at the end of the day, but they had the character to make that decision knowing it was the right thing to do.
Wow. That's an incredible story. I've heard that you only truly find out what you value once it costs you.
Yeah.
something. That's a great example. And I think the fact that this was not just Ben saying, hey, at the top, I'm going to demonstrate this, but it had so saturated the culture that your team felt comfortable proceeding.
I think that was the most gratifying. It was a hard situation and it was hard to take. But knowing that that decision was made without my input, was the most satisfying thing of the whole equation.
So I'm curious, some of these qualities, such as character and integrity, loyalty, some of the ones that you mentioned, are those things that you think in the right environment and in a willingness to learn, someone can grow those? So I imagine, hey, you've got a technician that's got some hard skills. Maybe you see some management potential, but you also see, if not red flags, some like concerns with how much do they live out this value of loyalty or integrity? To what degree, in your experience, has just the right environment with the right people around them and the right values from the top been able to fill those gaps? Or is there just kind of like a fundamental misalignment and it's not going to work?
Yeah, I think everybody is born with a innate, percentage of that, but I do believe it, that it can be and is taught and learned. Who you surround yourself with, what you're looking at, what you're reading, what you're doing, and then having the courage to make those right decisions as they come along.
Can you give me an example? And again, let's make it anonymous if necessary, but where you saw someone who had the hard skills that you thought would be helpful to bring into management, but they just needed support on the relational human to human side. I know people that are excellent workers, they're very process oriented, but just how to show a team member that you care for them
Yeah,
is something that requires a little bit of intention.
yeah, we're all wired differently.
Yeah.
And we've got several members on our leadership team who are process, systems driven individuals that have to work harder, at the people side of the equation. Fortunately, the people side of the equation, it comes naturally, easier for me, and I have to work harder on the processes and system side of the equation. So surrounding myself and our team, with a good mix of that is important. And then, those that are wired one way, being able to work with and share with those maybe who are not wired as equal, on the other side, I think is beneficial. If we're all wired the same way, working together, it would make it very difficult.
Totally. Do you guys go into like awareness of the way each person is wired and the strengths and weaknesses they have? Like, how do you acknowledge you're really strong in this area and I want to see you grow in this area? What are the cadences or systems that you guys have in place to help round out and strengthen employees?
We do. We've over the years, we use the DISC profile, we use the Myers-Briggs, we use Colby profile. There's a working genius now that Patrick Lencioni has come out with. So we actually have taken all those assessments and keep records of those and make visuals of those to keep in front of us to remind us who we're working with and what we're doing. Because again, some people have strengths that I need and vice versa. I have strengths that benefit them, in their leadership growth as well.
And so just to make this tangible, are you saying that like on people's desks, you can see their DISC profile and Myers-Briggs and stuff like that?
We don't have it on their desk, but we do have them electronically that we share, in particular meetings or planning sessions and so forth to remind ourselves. We've got some big boards and magnets that, in the specific planning meetings that we'll go ahead and acknowledge and put those, magnets and dots in the certain places. So everybody's aware of, who's what and who scores high in these areas, who doesn't score as high in other areas. So when we're, completing the strategic planning process, that's in front of us and who needs to be working with who.
That's so, actually, I've never heard of a company that just lays it out that way where you can see like 2x2 chart where everyone's slotted and stuff like that. And it sounds like, I know some people that might say, don't put me in a box. But I know other people would say it's so helpful
Sure.
to understand myself better and understand the personalities of the people around better. So it sounds like that latter category is really where
Yeah, those assessments are all different. They're often painful to take and, take a lot of time, but it's remarkable, if people answer them genuinely, how much they can shed light on and how well they can define, one aspect or the other of who someone is.
that's awesome. I want to talk about strategic decision making and this strategic planning a little bit more. Like we both said, it's tempting to just wait for jobs to come in and react. How have you built that muscle internally to be forward looking at Southeast Restoration?
Yeah, it's very strategic, and we plan over a year in advance.
Mm.
I'm working on 2025 and 2026 calendars now because we have to, with an organization of our size, we have to coordinate schedules and calendars and be strategic about when we're meeting, what we're talking about, and what we're doing, and we have to do it ahead of time. We can't do it in the moment. It's got to be ahead of time. So we're literally scheduling next year's calendar now, and then unless something changes, we kind of evolve and move that. And then when we see, things that aren't working and that need to be updated or changed, we can do that. But it's the preparation, staying in front of it, knowing because, if there was a meeting that needed to be scheduled and I waited till this week to schedule it for next week, chances are half the people are going to be, busy or out on, PTO or somewhere and not be able to attend. So it would not be as productive. But if I can see it on my calendar, quarter by quarter, going into the next quarter and strategically plan accordingly for whatever the meetings and the agendas are, then, it makes it a whole lot easier to be successful and, productive in those meetings.
I picture a restoration leader saying, I totally want us to become more forward thinking, but always something comes up, right? There's always a storm or some sort of crisis that we have to deal with. And what I would hear in that is maybe you, as the person at the top, have not successfully made the case for why it's so important. And you're allowing the priorities of the day to feel more urgent. And maybe they are more urgent, but not necessarily more important. So I think that there's probably a vision and leadership piece that also has to be necessary before a company can really start to develop that muscle. Is that fair?
It is fair. Yeah. Personally, there's things that are in people's desires on and things that are in their drudgeries on, or strengths and weaknesses, whatever it is. And again, I think it's building a team that can help and work off of each other's strengths and weaknesses and be able to do that, because there's other executives in our organization that aren't strong in the planning and the calendaring, sector of our business, and they rely on me to make sure that part of the business is getting done. And again, going back to the systems and processes, the integral details of the systems and processes is not in my desire zone, and is a weakness of mine. And knowing that, making sure that we've got the right people in the right place to focus on, those things. But being able, my role in being able to stay ahead of the curve and make sure that we're talking about the things that we need to be talking about today, knowing that it's going to affect what happens tomorrow.
And so if someone at the top, like an owner or leader, they just are maybe not naturally wired to think about the 5-10 years, where are we going? And so they can see the fruit of that, which is they have a team that's reactive, but not necessarily thinking strategically more than the next season. What would your counsel or advice to them be?
First piece of advice would be to find someone that can help them, they can recognize and that can help take that pressure off of them, but knowing that it's a necessity to move the organization forward. Find the person where they're weak to help the organization become stronger, and recognize how important that is. Because you use the word, they're reactive and they would prefer to be responsive.
Yes.
And in order to be able to be responsive and, to do things more productively, more profitably, they're going to need that person to do that. So being willing and humble enough to recognize that if that's a weakness, to find the right person to come in and take those, responsibilities and giving them the reins to do so.
And I think that there's probably this archetype that maybe some people have of, oh, I'm the leader. I have to do it all. I have to be the vision caster and the top executor. And what I hear you saying is, if you're going to be a good leader, you have to have some humility to acknowledge where you're weak and bring in other people to support you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, again, we're all wired, God wired us all a specific way, and we're all wired a specific way. And as hard as you can work to be better in certain areas, it will become frustrating if you try too hard. And that doesn't mean you can't get better at it, but recognizing that it's not a strength and it could be a weakness, but recognizing that it's not a strength and putting the right people in the right places to be able to accomplish what you're looking to do, overall.
Awesome. I have just a few rapid fire
Sure.
questions I want to fire your way, and then we'll wrap up here. So first one is, I wonder if there are any like principles or timeless truths that have really stuck with you as you've formed your idea of what a good leader is.
People first. I mentioned that earlier. I studied Chick-fil-A's founder, Truett Cathy, early on. And I think I'm wired and he was wired where he was people first and not as financially, motivated. And again, that took care of itself. Excellence and cleanliness is something that, is critical. I believe in setting the right tone and setting the team up, for success. And so I do believe that that's something that separates, the normal, from those who can excel and be even top performers in their industry or whatever, wherever they're at. And then again, going back to the loyalty, the trust, integrity, piece of it is something that is important. So Zig Ziglar, says you can have anything in life you want if you just help enough other people get what they want. So that's been a quote that I've held on to for a long time, and that is important to me because when I get myself out of the way and I don't try to do things for myself, but I'm making others successful, it tends to make me successful in whatever areas, that I'm interested in.
Last question, very similar theme. I am wondering if there is any leadership lessons or feedback that you've received from a leader in your life that has stuck with you.
I watch a lot of, podcasts or webinars from leadership coaches. I'm a sports guy, so one of the principals from football coach over in Clemson, South Carolina, Dabo Sweeney, said, "I will do what I can when I can, so I will not wish I would have when I could have." And so I take that to heart, and it's something that I live by, making sure I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing when I can, because I don't want any regrets on the back end.
Some of you may have heard that just a few weeks ago, we launched the inaugural RIA Cost of Doing Business Report, powered by KnowHow. I just want to take a few minutes to talk about this report and the impact that it's already having in the industry.
Ben, why is it important for restoration leaders and owners to get their hands on this one-of-a-kind report?
Yeah, I believe this cost of doing business survey is a tool that the industry has needed for at least the 30 years that I've been in the industry, and if not longer, because there has been a lot of assuming and guessing on, what the accurate, numbers are. And there's really never been a survey that has, to this depth, that have asked the right questions to be able to get the industry knowledge that we need. So as this survey comes out. I know there's over 100 companies that, have filled this out. It's a detailed, in-depth survey asking, difficult questions around financials and other things that is going to give us feedback and knowledge as a pool that we've never had in the industry. And so I'm excited about where this cost of doing business survey is, what it's going to show, how it's going to reflect the industry trends, and potentially some of the things that we need to be addressing moving forward.
Ben, one thing that a lot of restoration companies tend to get surprised by is this idea of succession planning, and that it's not, but it's not something you can just fix in a year or 2 years.
Sure.
It requires long-term focus. Where have you seen restoration companies and owners go wrong when thinking about succession planning? And I'm curious, where have you seen them go right and do it really well?
Well, fortunately or unfortunately, I haven't seen too many right examples of succession planning. I think the trend, and it's not only the restoration industry, but it's really all industries, across the board. If people had one regret, it was they waited too long to start the conversations and making some of those decisions. And I'm working with professionals now, and I have been. I'm a planner by nature, and because of that, I saw these things and people who are a different generation and further along than I was, and I'm just glad I started now. And then the professionals that I'm working with, corporate attorneys, CPAs, wealth management advisors, all of these people, have complimented us on starting the succession plan and as early as we have, because they say way too often it's not until a decision has to be made, and then it's really too late to do so. So I don't think you can start too early. You may not have all the answers, but you can start laying the foundational blocks, as soon as you can, to make sure that, whatever those next steps are, because they're different for everybody. So laying the next steps, those next blocks for the foundation of what the succession plan is going to be.
So Ben, just following up on that, then I'm curious, if someone has said, I have not taken this seriously enough up to this point, but I need to start, what are those first 2-3 questions they should ask themselves just to kickstart that discussion around succession planning?
Yeah, I think for me, it's, finding the professionals that, can help you ask the right questions. You're likely not going to have the answers, but you got to start with the right questions, and having people that work around succession planning on a consistent basis. So corporate attorneys, CPAs, wealth management advisors, having insurance professionals, having the people that can help answer or ask you the right questions, whether it be around the legal aspect of it, whether it be around the tax implications of some of it, but asking the right questions on the front end.
And would you give a timeline where you say, like, hey, I don't think you should start thinking about it less than this amount of time before you want to move on to whatever's next?
Yeah, I don't think I think it's at least a 5 or 10 year process. And I think it's going to change.
Yeah.
But again, if you've got the foundation blocks built, the changes are much easier. If you don't, and then you have to rush into succession planning and making decisions, it's going to cost you money and frustrations, and having to make decisions on the spot, and without that timely planning. Because if you give yourself the runway that's necessary to do it correctly, you'll be able to lay that roadmap out like you want to.
It was really helpful. I appreciate that, Ben. Hey, Travis here. I want to thank Ben Looper for sharing his expertise and experience and wisdom with everyone today. If you want to learn more about Ben's approach, first head to Restoration and Remediation's website, rnrmagonline.com, where you can read a case study about how Ben thinks about leadership and the impact it's having at Southeast Restoration. Additionally, you can head to buildingleadersbook.com to pre-register for When Building Leaders, the new book by KnowHow, launches on October 7th. There is going to be a ton of never before seen insight in that book. We've released early copies already, and it's already getting rave reviews. People are very excited. And like Leighton said at the top of this episode, super, super timely, super, super impactful. So head to buildingleadersbook.com to pre-register for your free copy of the ebook. You can also head to costofrestoration.com to download your free copy of the Cost of Doing Business report. That's available to you for free. And I would ask, if you're listening to this podcast and it's been valuable, subscribe. Wherever you get your podcasts, we're going to have more episodes coming in the future. Interviews with Mark Springer, Julie Johnson, Holly Murray, Marcy Richardson, Steve Glazik. Tons of super impactful leaders that have thought deeply about leadership, not only how to become the leader that you want to be, but how to build that next generation of leaders at your company. All right, thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.